everybody, welcome to another video by Liminal Spaces. So today we are talking about the Fallout television show. It is fantastic. I had such a blast watching this show. I'm a big Fallout fan. I'm a big Bethesda fan, to be perfectly honest with you. I played a ton of Elder Scrolls, of course. That's probably the one that I played the most of the video games. Skyrim and Oblivion and all that. But I've also played a lot of Fallout, of course. Fallout New Vegas, Fallout 3, Fallout 4. Those are the games that I've probably played the most with them. And of course, Starfield. I really enjoyed Starfield. That's tons of fun. I've gone through one complete run of it, and I'm sure I'm going to play it a bunch more, obviously, before the next Elder Scrolls comes out, I'm sure. Really loved it. I mean, the show is just chocked full of all kinds of Easter eggs, I guess I'd call them, but it's weird because the show is Fallout, so it's not really an Easter egg that it's about Fallout, but there's just so many tiny things in it that refer back to the video game itself, which is really the way it has to be. I'm really thankful that they didn't just buy the rights and slap the name on some weird future post apocalyptic thing. You know, they really kind of made Fallout, which is just incredible. If you're a Fallout fan at all, you will love this. I mean, the doors, you know, I don't know how to. It's so strange that Bethesda has taken so much time on the doors for Fallout. And in fact, all of their games, watching a door open in Starfield or in Fallout is just this really crazy experience because they're shaped different and they use different kinds of hinges and they have different locks, right? Lock picking is a huge deal in these games. It's really wonderful, and they've got a person who's in charge of the door, right? And they have their little Pip Boy on, of course, and they got to pull the little cord out and plug it in to get the door to open. It's really incredible. They've got the stim packs. There's a point where a bad guy uses jet, you know, to kind of pump themselves up. Uh, it's a ton of fun. It seriously is. If you love Fallout, you're just going to adore it. So I should tell you, I've only watched the first episode. This is not a big spoiler thing going into the entire season. It's going to take me time to watch all that TV, right? But the first episode, just wonderful. Seriously, absolutely worth checking out. I do want to talk about a few things about it, and these are artistic choices that I want to bring up. In my opinion, there's no real problem with this show, right? I can't say like this was totally miscast or anything weird like that. I mean, it's just really good. It's really good. But there are some artistic choices that I would have made just slightly different, you know? And I just want to bring those up because it's fun to talk about that stuff. It's fun to talk about the show. And of course, my opinion about things is going to be different than your opinion about things. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? Anything that I bring up, and you can be like, no, they totally did that, or I never would have done that, you know, whatever. Just put it in the comments, right? So I do want to bring up just a few points that I noticed that I might have tackled slightly differently than the way the show did. So first off, I need to bring up tone because this show has made a very bold and interesting choice. And I know Chris brought up tone when he was talking about watching Fallout in the update video. So you can hear him talk about that if you go back to the channel update for last week. They have three different stories running at the same time. And that's not unusual, right? That's been happening for a very long time in storytelling. But what is kind of unusual about the way this show is handling that is each of the three stories has a different tone. And tone is like, I guess the easiest way to describe it is like funny or serious, right? Is it sexy or is it sarcastic? Right? There's different ways you can do things. And that's kind of the tone of the piece. So these three stories are so different and individual, and they run on their own, that them having different tones really makes it feel like you're watching three different shows. Now, I do want to point out that that's kind of how video games work in a very interesting way. I feel like that if you play Fallout, one person is going to have a completely different experience than another person will because of the type of quest that they're drawn to, right? You can do one quest that takes 10 minutes and then turn around and do another quest that takes 4 hours and is a completely different tone than the 10-minute one that you just did. Maybe the 10-minute one was really silly and now this one's really serious, you know? It'll flip tones on you all the time. And I think in video games that's kind of become important. I feel like if every quest, every side quest had the exact same tone, I think people might burn out on the game before they get really far into it. Video games are obsessed with replay value, of course, so they want these things to be different so that the next time you play with a different kind of character, you're going to hit a quest that maybe you didn't hit before, and it's going to be a different tone than the last quest you did, and you're going to feel like you're playing a different game. It gives it replay value to jump through tones. And I find it exciting and weird and experimental that they chose to do that, I believe, throughout this show. That the tone shifts so dramatically from plot A to plot B to plot C. Also, like I said, all these are basically plot A. There's three plot A's. I kind of wonder if they had meetings way back before the show kind of got going, if they were talking about trying to create some kind of Fallout cinematic universe, right? Where they would have several different shows running at the same time. So I wonder if they were talking about that and they kind of talked about the three different ways that a Fallout show could go, and then by the end they were like, let's just put them all in, you know, because it does fit the video game, right? I really feel like if you love Fallout, you're going to love this, but I wonder if you don't know what Fallout is, I'm very interested to know what you would think of this show. If you just watched the show without playing the video game, would you enjoy it? I think is a very interesting, weird question because I feel like it's kind of cutting edge. It's kind of experimental. And I wonder if that's the direction we're going to go or if we're only going to get one season of Fallout and never see it again, you know? I don't know how to tell how Fallout's doing. I think artistically it's incredibly successful, honestly, but I don't know if we went and asked, are we going to get a season two? I don't know if they can answer that yet, right? They probably want to see how many people watch it, how long they watch it for. Do they watch all the episodes or just one? You know, they've got a lot of data to collect, I'm sure. But hopefully we get a lot more Fallout because I think it's incredibly successful. So I was really surprised by that tone choice. Very experimental, I feel like. So if you get a show like Lost, right? Lost has episodes that are different tones, but they have a specific character that represents that tone. And when they start an episode with that character, you know what the episode's going to be like, right? If Hurley opens the episode for Lost, you know it's going to be kind of a silly, lovable episode because it's Hurley, right? If Jack opens the episode, then you know it's going to be kind of a brooding, dark episode. It just depends on which character, but the entire show is that way. They don't bounce through tone throughout that specific episode. The show has different tones, but each episode has its own specific tone. But this, yeah, it's really fun and weird because you just feel like you're watching a whole different show all of a sudden. Some artistic choices that were made that I want to talk about just for fun. First off, so the show opens. It feels like 1950s, but the future, right? You've got this beautiful futuristic landscape, this city in the background. But then you got this cowboy doing cowboy tricks with a rope. You got black and white TVs, right? It's a birthday party. There's a bunch of kids there. It doesn't feel like today at all, right? It's like retro, but the future at the same time, which is dead on. Fantastic. So they bring up this thumbs up thing, right? There's a couple of guys making fun of the cowboy, and they say they're taking pictures, and they say, do that thumbs up thing, just to kind of rub in the fact that he's doing a birthday party instead of being a famous Hollywood person or whatever. And he says, I don't really feel like doing the thumbs up thing because of the situation we're in right now. And you don't really understand what that means right at the moment, but of course, Fallout generally starts on the brink of World War III or some kind of nuclear war. So, of course, he's referring to that. And you find out a little bit later because his daughter brings up, why wouldn't you do the thumb up thing? And he doesn't tell her, and she gets depressed, and then he needs to tell her that the thumb up thing is kind of based on the idea of when you should run from a nuclear weapon. If you can cover it with your thumb, if you're looking at it and you put your thumb over it and you can't see the explosion anymore, you're safe. You're okay. You should get out of there, but you're okay. But if you try to cover it and you can't, then you're dead. You're dead. And that's the rule that they set down, right? So then, of course, there's this massive nuclear explosion, which is probably 2 miles from them, right? I mean, it's on top of them. It's huge. And the actress is wonderful, right? She holds her thumb up and she's terrified, and she asks her dad, is it my thumb or your thumb? Because she can't quite, well, I shouldn't say can't quite, because she cannot cover it, right? There's no way. But artistically, I really would have loved to have seen from her point of view, because they hold off showing the explosion. And it's a dramatic, beautiful moment. It's really good, right? But it's a little bit weird. Like, he comes out, nobody notices that a nuke went off. And they justify that. They show people taking pictures, and they have the old flash bulbs in the cameras. So there's flashes going off. And then there's this nuclear explosion which causes a flash. But the only one that really notices is the little girl. So the dad comes out to give her cake while this nuclear explosion is happening. And she says, my thumb or your thumb? And he turns around and looks. They're not showing us, right? We're just watching the characters. And he says, oh, that's not a bomb. That's just smoke. And then we finally get to see it. And he's right. It's just this pile of smoke on the city. And then slowly it becomes a nuclear explosion, right? And they're very scared, of course. And then slowly we see the shock wave coming. And the shock wave hits, right? All the glass shatters and everybody seems to be okay, but it did, there was a wave, right? It happened. But I really would have loved to have seen her point of view, that flash happens, she panics and whips around, and then we see from her point of view, through her eyes, we see this huge atomic explosion as large as our television, right? If you've got a 40-inch television or 50-inch, whatever, if you've got that as big as your television, this huge explosion happening, and then this little tiny thumb, right, come up into the frame trying to cover this. I mean, it's right, this massive explosion, because they talk about it so much. And of course, she puts her thumb up. I just wanted to see it from her point of view with that huge explosion, because they're massive. You know, they do a really good job of freaking you out about how big they are. And that's the crazy thing about these artistic choices, is you get it. You know the instant it happens, it's bigger than her thumb. You completely understand it, you know. And that's why I said these are just opinions, right? They didn't do anything wrong. The actress's performance is great. The dad's performance is great. I just really wanted to see that shot. You know, I mean, honestly, that could have been the cover of the whole show, right? The poster, Fallout, right? This tiny thumb with this huge nuclear explosion. Secondly, they do a great job once we're in the vault. Yeah, next we go to the vault. And back to tone. This is interesting. I kind of summed up how each of the stories felt tone wise. And these are terrible descriptions. Okay, they don't match 100% at all. I just wanted to try to give them some kind of a name so that we could see that they were vaguely different, you know? So I feel like the vault stuff is vaguely reminiscent of that Kimmy Schmidt show. I don't know if you guys remember, there's a girl who was locked in a bomb shelter her whole life. She finally gets to come out and experience the real world. It's a goofy comedy. Our vault here feels vaguely like that. It's got a kind of comedic, very innocent tone, which I really appreciate, you know. Seeing the vault people in Fallout feels that way. That's how they are. And it's really, really neat to see that in this. But then you jump to the war section, right? Which, like I said, is definitely in the video game. The video game jumps through these tones like mad. It doesn't care. But TV's not used to that. The war section is kind of... I don't watch a lot of war films, so I guess I'd sum it up as like the Hurt Locker. I think that's kind of the last one that I saw. I don't need to be reminded how horrible war is. I totally get it. I get it, you know. So I don't see a lot of that kind of stuff, but that doesn't mean it shouldn't exist. Of course, right? We have plenty of wars. We still need to get the message out that it's not a great thing. I feel like that section is much more dramatic, much darker, right? And then the third section with the cowboy, he's so sarcastic, and it's dark but funny. So the best thing I could think of was probably Deadpool, to sum it up. So you've kind of got Kimmy Schmidt, Deadpool, and Hurt Locker, like running on these separate tracks. You know what I mean? Which is so interesting and so weird, and enjoyable. You know, I hope that it can kind of take off a little bit, you know, because the old way where you had to watch an entire episode, like if I knew it was a Jack and Kate episode for Lost, I knew I wasn't going to have as much fun, you know. It just wasn't the same show. I'd rather watch the guy in the wheelchair or the crazy cowboy guy, you know, than Kate and Jack. I think it's really neat doing your different tones in one episode, because then you get some of what you want and you watch the other, you know, but then you probably get back to the stuff you were looking forward to, and it's interesting. It's a very cool idea. So we get to see her using her skills, which I thought was brilliant, right? Because that's right out of the video game, of course. The video game, though, you get to train, you get to level up in these skills. You use your Pip-Boy to pick where you want to put your skill points, I believe, if I remember correctly. So I kind of would have liked to have seen, as she went through trainings, her Pip-Boy registering her successes. I think that that could have been a lot of fun. And they do great Pip-Boy stuff. Like the whole sequence is dedicated to her asking if she can get married to somebody from another vault. And the way they say yes, they don't tell her yes. They all look at their Pip-Boys and say yes in there. And then she checks her Pip-Boy. They're sitting 3 feet from each other. She checks her Pip-Boy and sees that the answer's yes, and she's very excited. So they do exactly what I'm saying, right? I wish they would have taken it a tiny bit further with all the training and where she was putting her skill points. Things she was choosing not to do versus things she was choosing to do, you know? I think that could have been a ton of fun. So they've got this kind of holodeck room, which is pretty cool. It's where they grow their food, basically. I know it would be very difficult to actually create enough food to sustain a population inside of a vault. You know, there's the show Wool. I don't think it was called. I can't remember what the TV show was called. The book was called Wool, where all these people live in this vault, and if somebody breaks the law, they send them outside to clean the cameras, to clean the glass so that people can see outside. And of course, going outside kills them because of the radiation or whatever. In that show, they also grow all the food that they need. But they try to make the vault seem so huge that they could have different floors dedicated to different things that they're growing. But of course, the floor that we see is the corn, right? It's the same in both these shows. Because I think a bunch of corn stalks really helps people understand that's where the food comes from, right? Even though I don't think it's feasible in any way, I, I, I understand that it's established. This is where the food comes from. So they're in the corn room. But they do a really neat thing where they have this projector that projects a corn field. So you feel like you're in this huge field outside, when in reality you're just in the vault in the little corn room. First off, I really would have loved to have seen somebody leaning against the back wall, only because I wanted the room to be tiny. And they don't really. It's tough because after the fight, the projector turns off and you can see the police stand by on the wall, and you realize, oh, that's kind of a small room, right? He's just killed the guy with the shovel. But then he takes his daughter's hand and they go running, and then they move to another part of the room where they were doing all the dancing and everything, and that room's pretty big. And then you kind of wonder, are there two of these rooms? Is there the entrance area where the projector is, and then off to the side you cut through some corn, and then all of a sudden you're in another room? Is there a second projector there? Like, I got a little bit confused about the layout, because the room suddenly was twice as big as I was hoping that it was. So I really would have loved to have seen somebody leaning against the back wall so that you realize how tiny the room actually is. And once again, we're getting into but where would they grow all the food, right? So it's a weird thing for vault shows to get away with how much food do you need, how many people actually live there, all that kind of stuff. There's a point where once the violence breaks out, somebody shoots the projector, and the projector, I guess the film stops and therefore melts, right? Because that hot bulb shooting through the film is going to melt that stuff, and it's going to start on fire. That's how it used to work. So I guess the film stops running and it begins to melt, and it creates this bubbling orange yellow surface on the walls, and they utilize it really well. During all of the fights, the whole background it's like the surface of the sun, right? It's this massive boiling craziness while all the violence is happening. And then when the dad finally drowns the guy in the pickle bucket, it goes away. It burns away to the point that you can't see it through the projector anymore. And you just get the please stand by on the walls, which is really fun to see, right? Because that's right out of Fallout. So I liked that, but I would have appreciated if they went just a little bit further with it, if we really could have seen it start to melt. Because the funny thing is, the shape that that melting would create, because it starts from the center and works its way out, looks like a nuclear explosion. And that's the first thing we said when we were... I watched this with a group of other people, Fallout friends, right? And the first thing we said is, that kind of looks like a nuclear explosion. But they didn't kind of make that thing up there. I wish that that would have started happening and everybody in the room could have kind of stopped and looked to see what was changing. Because, I mean, all the walls are this. The room looks massive. But the minute it starts melting, it would be right on top of you. You know, the whole wall would begin to turn orange. And I wish they all kind of just stopped for a second, looked up, and could see this huge mushroom shape happening on the wall. And then for the bad guys, I guess, to, you know, get excited by it, and the vault people to be terrified by it. And then everything just amps up. The violence just explodes. That's when people start taking jet, and that's when the violence goes full Paul Verhoeven. You know what I mean? And I know it had to get shot. That couldn't be where the violence started. They had to be fighting before that. But I feel like it really could have pushed everything up. And it did. That's the crazy thing about these artistic choices, right? Having that mass of bubbling violence in the background really made those scenes feel more aggressive and crazy. I just wish we would have had that mushroom cloud moment. I think that could have been a lot of fun. So they have these strange ad transitions throughout the show, which I just want to point out because they're so weird. I know that Amazon Prime, I think, maybe it wasn't Amazon, somebody raised their prices unless you wanted to watch commercials, then you didn't have to pay more. But I can't remember who it was. But I feel like this show was made anticipating that there might eventually be commercials in it, because you get these really weird transitions. Like there's a point where they're all dancing because of the wedding. And suddenly we cut to an empty hallway in the vault. And the camera's moving down this empty hallway. And this eerie music takes over and it slowly fades to black. And then we're back at the party and people are eating cake and talking, right? And I assume a little bit of time passed because they're not dancing anymore, right? Some time has passed. They're all chatting now instead of dancing. But that is a really bizarre way to show time passing, you know? I feel like that really, really was trying to be an ad break, but I also feel like the show wasn't written knowing where the ads would come. So they just filmed that because you want to leave people on a cliffhanger when you go to commercial, of course. Or there's a small chance they're going to change the channel and not come back, right? If you watch the old Star Trek episodes or whatever, the ads, I mean, they're timed perfectly. Somebody's about to die and the music gets really tense and you go to commercial, right? But now I feel like it's so hard to tell that I wonder if they just filmed that and threw it in there, and then wherever commercials end up going, they're just going to slap that in the editing wherever so that they can go to commercial and you still feel a little bit tense. Like, what the heck was that? You know, it's a bizarre, interesting choice. We all commented on it when we saw it. We were like, was that just time changing? Very interesting. Okay, so there's a sex scene in this. And you guys know when it comes to violence and when it comes to sex, it's something that I feel like needs to It needs to further the plot, or else you know they're just doing it to make more money. And I want to talk about this just a tiny bit. I believe this came out of the late 60s and the early 70s when people could not watch pornography. Like if you didn't live in New York or LA or maybe Chicago, if there wasn't a pornography theater in your town, you could not watch pornography. And even that, even going to a theater with a group of people to watch pornography would be awkward, I feel like, you know? So, because America, of course, has this stigma on sex and on pornography, and we're raised to believe that it's somehow bad, right? There's nothing wrong with it. It's not bad. It's just that at that time, nobody could get it, right? You could buy magazines, but that's a very different experience than watching pornography. It became very profitable for Hollywood films to put a sex scene in their movies. And I believe that the directors in the 60s and the 70s were not doing it to make money, right? They were doing it to push the envelope. They were doing it to be artistic or to shock people or to really be able to talk about the subjects that they wanted to talk about. But I know that the studios realized these movies that are more shocking, that have sex and have violence, are making a lot more money than the stuff we used to do in the 50s. So the studio heads kind of figured that out, and they began to realize that you need to put a sex scene in your movie if you want it to make money. And I feel like that is a real shame. It's a real problem because we're not seeing movies that are truly pushing the envelope. We're just seeing normal TV shows that they randomly chuck sex in because they think it'll make them more money. Now, the sex scene in this, I don't feel like it furthers the plot in any way. You know, they keep the Kimmy Schmidt thing going. I think they do a wonderful job of it. I'm going to be perfectly honest, because the guy gets completely naked and she doesn't take off any of her clothes. She's got this big wedding dress on, you know, and then she gets on top of him, so the wedding dress is covering everything. It's a silly sex scene. It's a silly sex scene. And like I said, I haven't seen all the episodes. I don't know what they try to do later, but I do not feel like this sex scene was necessary, but at the same time, I feel like they made such interesting and weird choices with it that it wasn't bothersome to me in any way. I always feel like when something just comes out of nowhere, I'm like, oh geez, here we go. Because you know that there was probably a fight. I mean, it's crazy talking about Blade Runner when the producers insisted upon having a sex scene and they ended up literally letting the original writer go. You know, if you go back and watch the original Blade Runner video, I talk about how much of a problem that was for that production, and yet the producers were insisting upon it, you know. And that's an older film, you know. I do believe that being able to show pieces of a sex scene in that preview probably brought more people to the theater, but I don't know that works anymore. With how accessible pornography is these days, I don't think it gives any kind of a boost, to be perfectly honest. You know what I mean? I don't know that it helps at all. Now, going to violence, the violence in this is 100% necessary. If you make a rated G Fallout movie, you're doing it wrong. Straight up. People who are used to Fallout are going to expect to see the things that they see in Fallout. You have to be faithful to that source material. The violence is 100% necessary in this, and it is violent. One thing I would have had fun with, I think, if it were possible, I don't think it is possible, but one thing I think could have been a lot of fun is in the video games, you can generally choose whether you want to see a bunch of violence or not. You can turn it off. And I generally turn it off. I don't need the extra blood splatter or whatever, you know what I mean? Because I play the games to do things, to collect things. You know what I mean? I don't care about their big old plot. I don't want to watch their movies. I just want to run around a crazy world and explore. I just love standing on top of a mountain and looking around at the beautiful scenery and then suddenly getting attacked by a wolf and dying. You know what I mean? I mean, it's so fun. These games are so much fun. But I appreciate that you can kind of adjust that, you know? And I think it would have been a ton of fun if there was some kind of interactive element with this video game TV show. There, of course, is a Black Mirror episode that's kind of a choose your own adventure. You use your remote and you literally re edit the episode as you go based upon the choices that you're making, which is tons of fun, but also tons of work, right? It's a big deal. But I think it would have been fun if there was some kind of a toggle you could use in order to tone down the violence, or if you wanted to see all the blood splatter and everything, you could turn it up, or other choices. If you could choose maybe what kind of a character you're watching, could be tons of fun, right? Do you normally like to play the Conan type when you make your own guy? Or do you like to play somebody who's like the lead in the vault section for this, right? Would that be the kind of character you would make? Somebody who doesn't understand the world they're in, but they're trying to get by? I think there could have been an interactive section, which is probably going to be way in the future because I'm sure it's a ton of work. But it'll be super fun when we're able to go to those lengths. I think it'll be very, very fun and cool. Yeah, the violence is just crazy in this. Like, we're talking like Paul Verhoeven violence, right? There's literally a part where a guy has a machine gun and he grabs this guy's head, puts the gun in his mouth, and then shoots through his head to kill a bunch of other people. Like, I mean, out there crazy violence. And it's like the video game, you know? That if you're gonna watch Fallout, for instance, if you watch a Grand Theft Auto movie, is there gonna be sex in that? Yeah, there is, because it's Grand Theft Auto, right? I mean, that's basically how that game got as popular as it did, to be honest. The violence and the sex, you know what I mean? It was really pushing boundaries for video games at the time. And I don't know morally what that means or how, you know, what we should feel about that. And honestly, I don't really care. It is what it is. It's Grand Theft Auto. People like it. You know, art doesn't dictate society. Art doesn't create society. It's the opposite. Society creates that art. People wanted that, and somebody made it, and it sold well. It wasn't like, I never dreamed that watching sex would be enjoyable until I found this, and now my whole life has changed. That is not the way it works at all, right? The society dictates the art. And our society wanted Grand Theft Auto, and they got it, you know? And somebody made a ton of money, right? There's a STEM pack section that I want to talk about. They have STEM packs in this, which is awesome. This is just like any of the other artistic choices. They did exactly what they needed to do. I would have done it slightly differently. So she gets stabbed. She's in trouble. She finds a first aid kit, which is exactly what you do in the video game. And the minute she saw that first aid kit, all of the Fallout fans in the room were like, "Oh shoot, there's a first aid kit. She's gonna get a STEM pack." She pulls it down, she pops it open, and it's packed with gauze and bandages and all kinds of stuff that you don't use in the game, right? And we were all like, "What?" But then she dug for a sec and she pulled out a STEM pack. And we were all like, "Yay!" And she gave herself the STEM pack and she was better, right? Now, there's a scene later where she staples herself up, which I thought was a little bit weird since she used a stem pack. But I love that there was a stem pack in there, but I hated that we were disappointed for a moment because when she popped that thing open, we couldn't see it. There should have just been 3 stem packs in that box. That's all they needed in there. We all would have had a blast. But the fact that all that other stuff was in there created this weird moment of, wait, are they screwing this up? And you don't want that, you know? So I feel like artistically they probably should have emptied that box out a little bit so that the stem pack was the thing that we saw. The point where they capture the dad was a tiny bit muddy for me. They come running down the hall. It's him and his daughter. Oh, and by the way, that's Kyle MacLachlan playing the dad, which I really loved, right? Of course, he's David Lynch's guy. He was Paul Atreides in Dune. But I believe he probably got this because of playing Del Cooper in Twin Peaks for David Lynch. I think that Del Cooper role really fits the kind of naive but dark area that Twin Peaks plays in. Twin Peaks is very naive. Same thing with Blue Velvet, right? These kids, it feels like the 50s. The clothes and the naivete of the kids, and then they stumble upon this drug dark world. I feel like honestly Fallout was probably inspired by David Lynch. You know, it would have to be Blue Velvet. It would have to be something early. But I really feel like that going back to the 50s, but keeping the darkness of the world is Fallout, you know, and it is David Lynch. And I think that the 80s kind of wanted to harken back to the 50s. It wanted to be more prosperous. And I feel like the sarcasm of Fallout and the sarcasm of David Lynch is commenting on that, you know, trying to get back to the good old days when the world is so dark. I think that's an interesting critique, both from the video game and from David Lynch. But it was really neat to see him there, to see that actor. I think he was a perfect choice for that role. But they're going to capture the dad, and she says, you need to choose. Do you choose your daughter or do you choose all these people? And he chooses his daughter. There's no question. He pushes her in the closet, locks her there. Choice is over. The minute that happened, I feel like they should have shot all those people. I don't understand why they then take the dad, they go to them and they say, run, right? Which is a nice thing to do. Maybe she's really a good person and she didn't really want to kill anybody. But then what about all the people they killed? You know what I mean? They destroyed this entire vault, tortured them, learned everything they could about the other vault, and then took advantage of this wedding ceremony. I mean, this is crazy. This entire thing is crazy. And of course, as I watch later, I'm going to learn more. I'm going to realize, oh, she was in the old vault, and they know each other, and blah, 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 you know, whatever the TV show does. But I feel like it was very strange that those guys got to run. The daughter was saved. They just captured the dad. This little bomb goes off, but everybody's fine. It was a very weird outcome for that whole scene. I feel like it probably would have been better if they just came running down the hall. Nobody was there, just the bad guys. There wasn't any other good guys. Because there's other good guys still alive, hiding in places back there, right? Of course. They come running down the hall. They see her, and she's like, you're coming with me. And the daughter's like, no, no. And he, as the dad, grabs his daughter, throws her in the closet and locks it, and says, fine, take me. Just don't do anything to her, right? Because he wants to protect his daughter, of course. And they just take him. I don't know why we had that weird debate thing happen and the choice, and it felt like it was just trying to be more dramatic than it needed to be, I guess. I'm not sure. So artistically, I had some opinions about that scene, right? The whole Hurt Locker thing, of course, you've got the weird. This wasn't my favorite part of the show, right? I would prefer to see the kind of retro '50s vault stuff as opposed to the Hurt Locker. Um, and one thing got me kind of weird is these guys worship the power armor. Of course, they want the technology from the past. That's from the video game. I totally get that. But the weird thing is, in the video game, these power armor suits are treated like hot rods. Like you can paint them up. You work on them in your garage. You put fire on them and you go out and you fight people. You know what I mean? I even believe there's races with them. I don't know how that works. I haven't got. I never get out of Boston when I'm doing Fallout 4 because there's so many things to search. Like I'm that idiot who likes to search everything and doesn't want to sell anything. I collect all the stuff I can find and I put it all in my workbench. You know what I mean? So I can't get out of Boston because there's just too much stuff there. But I know if you go further, there's that racetrack. And I don't know what they're racing, but I feel like it's associated with power armor. I feel like those are the power armor people. Um, so I don't know. I don't know about dealing with it purely as a tank that if you get it, you can destroy your enemy. I feel like in Fallout it's more than that. It's a passion, it's a hobby, it's this beautiful thing from the past, right? It's a hot rod. And that's different than a tank. So I don't love the Hurt Locker stuff, but I totally understand why it's there, and I totally understand that there are people who play Fallout who take it very seriously, right? I get it. It needs to be there. It's totally justified. It just isn't my favorite part of the show. So I don't have anything from there. There's just a couple moments. There's that weird moment where they decide to make him a squire instead of his friend, and it's really awkward how we get there that the friend gets sabotaged and everybody thinks it's him, which is really stupid because they're friends. I don't get it at all. But okay, fine, everybody thinks it's him, so they take him in and they do this interrogation scene where the guy says, we've given you everything. We gave you a name, we gave you a place to live. Why did you do this? And of course, he has to say, I didn't do it. It wasn't me. And the power armor guy's walking behind him, so he's really paranoid. So he looks guilty as hell, right? And he eventually confesses that he didn't do it, but he did wish something would happen so that somebody else would get picked. Could be him, which would be incredible because that's what he wants. But it could have been somebody else so he could keep his friend, right? And they don't go into that really. He just says, I wish it would happen. Is that wrong? And the guy says, yeah, it's wrong because this is your family. We need to work together on the battlefield. Everyone's just as important as everyone else. You know, you can't have jealousy on the battlefield. That doesn't work. You know, you can't have fear or anger against somebody else. You've got to all be working together. So it's wrong, of course. And then he says, "Do you have any last words to say for yourself?" Because they're just going to kill him because he, even if he didn't do it, he's weak and terrible. He cannot work in this society. And he says, "I am incredibly thankful that you saved me, that you gave me a name, and that you gave me a reason for existing. And I would gladly die for you." Which I think is kind of the way I wanted to see it play out. First off, I would have cut the beginning. I would not have him say, "We gave you a name. We gave you a place to live. Why did you treat us like this?" You know, I would have cut all that because he needs to redeem himself in this moment. And I think the best way for him to redeem himself is to pledge his total loyalty to the cause, which is exactly what he does, right? But having that little opening bit muddies it up. It makes it weaker. It's like he's just apologizing, right? Like the guy said, "We gave you everything," and he says, "You're right. I'm sorry. You gave me everything, and I'm really sorry." Right? It just turns it into that, without saying we gave you everything. When he says, "You gave me everything, and I am 100% dedicated to you," it's twice as powerful because he's not just reacting to what he heard, it's his truth. And that's what saves him. Not only does it save him, but it gets him promoted, right? And I wish that we could have seen him go from this sniveling grunt to this wholly dedicated warrior to this person, right? Because I believe that's the direction that this story wants to go. They need people who will sacrifice everything for the cause. It's a religious order, it feels like, right? This is a holy war, and they want holy warriors. And this person thinking that they're about to die and dedicating their death to this group would be appealing for this holy order, right? It's not my favorite topic, but I feel like they muddied it up. They got a little weird in that confession scene, and then there's also the I'm going to call it the freak out on the toilet, right? Because it's a really weird scene. So there's this scene where they're out on the beach and he's doing the latrine duty, which would be the worst, right? He has to move the tires, bury what's there, dig a new hole, and put the tires on top of the new hole, right? And every day you got to do that, or else your latrine is going to become unusable, right? It's too much. And they do a great job in this. They just have this stack of tires and this little wooden toilet seat on the top so that you can sit on it to go to the bathroom. Those tires are just disgusting. And they've got, I think they used computers to create this swarm of flies that live on top of the toilet, right? I mean, it's just disgusting. But then there's this scene where the actor has to flip out while working with the toilets. But they don't do it out on the beach, they do it in camp. So he's literally working on a toilet. I think he's working on the toilet. He might just be standing there. I don't know. But he's working on a toilet in camp with everybody throwing a big old party 20 feet from him. They're 20 feet away from the toilet. And it's in between the dorms. They're in a walkway between the dorms. He's there with the toilet. And he freaks out and he starts screaming. And he's smashing the lid down on this toilet. And the toilet snaps and he rips the rest of it off. And in agony and exhaustion, he turns around and sits down on the edge of the toilet. Now, he's not sitting up on the top of the toilet. The tires get bigger as they go further down, so he sits down on a lower toilet, so that the fly group is like right by his head, like, and I know it's the dark moment, right? Like his whole life is going to crap, okay, but I feel like that's just too much. I don't know why the toilet is between the dorms. I don't know why he's standing by the toilet. I don't know why he's touching the toilet and breaking it. I don't know why he's sitting on the edge of the toilet. Like, it's way too much. It's so gross and so weird. The actor needs the flip out moment. It has to be in the show. But did it have to be with the toilet? We already established that he digs the latrines. His life is crap. We get it. I don't know why they literally had to put him in the crap. You know, I mean, it's a weird choice. So that I would handle that a little bit differently as well. Okay, so that's all my stupid opinions about the way they should have shot the Fallout show. But I do want to reinstate it's incredible. It's a wonderful show. If you know nothing about Fallout, please watch it. Check it out. At least watch the first episode. It's only an hour long, right? You're probably in between shows right now anyway. Watch the first one and let me know what you think in the comments. If you do know what Fallout is and you enjoy Fallout, you're going to love the show. Watch the whole thing. I'm sure all of you already have. I don't have anything to say about the cowboy stuff because it's not well established. I already talked about the cowboy in the beginning. I think he's a wonderful, likable character, a very good guy. But I know that now he's completely different, so who knows how that's going to turn out. I should say, yeah, my prediction for the future, right? I hope that there's a great speech that Kyle MacLachlan gives where he talks about how in the future they'll be able to leave the vault and hopefully they'll be able to remake America or the world the way they are in the vault. Hopefully, going outside won't make the vault people like the people outside. So I think that's going to be a big running theme for her throughout the show. That we're going to see her become more jaded and more aggressive, but I hope that she remains the way she is. I hope she keeps her innocence and her love of life after leaving the vault. And I think that the way that that will kind of sum up, maybe, whether it's the end of the 7th season or the end of this first season, I haven't watched them all. Hopefully, the ghoul has changed too much and cannot become like her. Hopefully, instead of him making her into him, she just ends up killing him off, right? And can retain herself. That's my hope for the future of the show, is that there is hope for humanity and that it's not a dark, terrible world and she becomes a ghoul just like him. Hopefully he would become like her, but I don't know that that's going to be possible for that character. So hopefully when she has to choose, she ends up killing him to save her father and to save her way of life and to try to change the outside world instead of letting the outside world change her and killing her father, or however that's going to work out, right? Whatever choice she has to make. All right, that was a lot. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please hit the like button and subscribe because we got so much more stuff like this. Check out the channel, honestly, because we've got a lot of fun stuff. And do subscribe and have a great day.